Hello, Ellie here with my sidekick Dottie. And today, as I've been saying a lot recently, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. When I first did my BookTube newbie tag like 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, somebody wrote a comment that they wanted me to talk about my writing. And I never did, I was always kind of scared to. But I want to talk about writing today. I started writing, I started considering myself a writer. Well, okay. So my fifth grade teacher, shout out to Mr. Strout if you ever see this, he was the first person to ever compliment my writing. He specifically complimented my voice in my writing. He said that I had a wonderful voice, very realistic, and he would love to see me develop that. And I'd always seen myself as good at math and good at certain parts of science and things like that. But that was the first time I had ever really been complimented on like a creative type of skill. So that kind of intrigued me. And then flash forward to 7th grade. 7th grade, I decided I was going to write a book. And I started writing this book that a 7th grader, like, it was terrible. Like, I look back at it and it was absolutely awful. But like the concept was kind of cute. It was pretty creative. I didn't have much character development going on or things like that, but you know, I was in 7th grade. I also started writing poetry that year, and I kind of stopped the poetry part actually, but I'll come back to that later. But yeah, I wrote a lot of poems that year. I started writing a book that year. I actually, if anybody is old enough to remember Xanga, I had 2 Xangas. I had one for my personal blog, I guess, and then I had one for this book I was writing. And it probably still exists somewhere. I probably still have the first like 4 or 5 chapters of my book out there in the world. I don't think anybody ever actually happened upon that Xanga and read it, but it's out there, I think. I might have shut it down at some point, I don't know. But anyway, 8th grade is when I started writing fan fiction because I became obsessed with Degrassi: The Next Generation, and I started writing fan fiction. And this is the first time that I ever was writing for an audience, because I was on a website and I remember I was obsessed with this one girl. She went by her middle name, Marie, at the time. And I was obsessed with her, and she wrote in script format, so I started writing in script format. And I remember one time one person, because everybody read this girl, Marie, and I remember her username was like Short Girl. I think there was a number, but it was Short Girl. And I remember one time somebody commented saying, "You're as good as Short Girl." And I was like, that is the greatest compliment I've ever gotten. And then all of a sudden I started to like become friends with Marie, and she switched to writing in point of view. So I switched to writing in point of view. I was just like copying her. And then the site that we were writing on, they started deleting any fan fictions that were about like real topics, like anything that had any sexual content or violent content, or basically anything that like they cover on the show, they were deleting. So we all switched to a different site at the same time. Like all of the popular fan fiction writers were like, let's go over here instead. So we all switched. And then we also got into the Harry Potter fandom a bit more in high school. I was staying away from writing Harry Potter before the last book was out. I wrote my first Harry Potter fan fiction literally the day after I finished the 7th book. I believe I started writing my first Harry Potter fan fiction. And it was just kind of my way of processing where the story went. And I noticed that like I loved it. I absolutely loved being able to take these characters and put them into my own plots, my own stories. And I realized I had a talent for it in terms of the characterization in particular. I was able to imagine those characters in different scenarios, and I could tell how it would go, what would happen. And apparently people agreed with me because I did have a pretty good audience. And I switched a couple different sites. I did end up on fanfiction.net with mostly my Harry Potter stuff. One of my fanfictions from college, so it was probably like 7 years ago now. I spent a good year working on it. I think it is still the best finished piece I've ever written. I actually have it printed out in book form just for myself on my bookshelf. And I actually still get comments and favorites on that like once a month, 7 years later, which is really cool. On to what I've been working on. So I've been working on my current book for about 3 years now, which is a really long time now that I think about it, that I'm still not done. This is the second book. Well, it's the second book I have come close to finishing. It is the one, okay, so there's the one I worked on in 7th grade, and then I actually started to pick that up again a few years later and realized I was still writing like a 7th grader, and that was not okay, like in college. So I put that one to sleep. And then I came up with a trilogy idea, and the first book in that trilogy is the first book I ever finished. I don't think it is publishable in its current form. I think I would have to completely re-examine it and make it completely different than the way it is. I think the overall trilogy is a publishable idea, but not the first book, which is important. And then I had bits and pieces of books 2 and 3 in that trilogy written. And then I had the very beginning of another idea that I came up with while I was working on that trilogy. All of that is kind of on the back burner right now, but what I realized through the trilogy is my strength has never been world building. I can write in somebody else's world, which I learned from my fan fiction writing, and I'm really good at characters and dialogue, but I'm not good at world creation. I have so much admiration for people that are, but that's not me. So I'm like, all right, let me go to contemporary. So I had this idea, and I'm not going to tell too much about it because I'm still on my first official draft. I mean, like, parts of it are probably on like the 5th draft, but parts of it are still not written yet, so parts of them are still draft 0. So I had the idea of this one girl who is very, very different from me, and at the very beginning of the story I was having a blast writing this crazy, confident, active, outgoing girl that was like obviously anything you write is a part of you, so it's obviously something that I had in me, but it was never something I was ever willing to let out. And then the moment she put herself into a situation that I've never been in, I just got stuck. And I was like talking to my friends, and I was trying to that are more outgoing than me, and trying to figure out how to get past this, until finally I'm like, all right, well, let's see what's going on with this girl's best friend, who's a lot more like me. And then I fell in love with the best friend. So her story became such a bigger part of the story, and it became so much more about their friendship and the way they interact, because that's something I'm able to connect to more. And I still have the plot that I originally came up with, but now that's only half of it instead of pretty much the whole thing. And I just find it interesting thinking about the way it's developed over the past 3 years, because like it started as the seed about this, and I actually did start at the beginning, which I usually don't start books at the beginning, or at least not the idea at the beginning. But this one I actually did start at the very beginning. Like, as it currently stands, the very beginning of chapter 1 is the first thing I wrote of this book. I think there are other parts that are stronger than that now, but it is still how it started. And I don't know, it's just crazy how things that I thought would be just a small part of the story have come to the surface and become such a huge part of it, almost taking the spotlight at times. And it's really cool. I definitely think I'm close to being done. I always called this probably like an 80,000 word book, and I'm at like 76,000 right now. I have 4 gaps I definitely still need to fill, and then one more where I'm like, I don't know if I want to put this scene in or not. But then, of course, there are other things where I'm like, okay, I feel like I need more development with this relationship. That would be like something that needed to be added throughout. So that would be a whole bunch that still need to be added in. Other things, so I definitely need a couple more sensitivity readers, because Unfortunately, there's not as much diversity and stuff in it as I would like, largely because I am basing the setting on where I grew up, which unfortunately was not super diverse. The little diversity I did include, I did make an important part of the person's identity, and there is a reason that the person has that racial identity, and I made it important to them, I hope, in a way that doesn't feel like I'm just putting it in to say I have diversity, which is part of why I do want sensitivity readers, because I want to make it clear that like the representation is important and I want it to be done in a way that is realistic and important. And I did have one person read parts, and she said that I was doing a pretty good job there. She was actually apparently very nervous when I told her that I was having this character be the identity that I'm just gonna say they are. But once she actually read that section, she was like, oh, all right, keep at it. Let's go. There are a lot of sexual identities, some much more prevalent than others. Some of that actually surprised me. I was not expecting to go as deep into one specific character's sexual identity as I ended up going. But at the same time, I think that it was actually really important for me as a writer and where I am in my life right now to include that in the story. It kind of let me process some stuff. If you've watched certain others of my videos, you might have sort of an idea where I'm going with that, but I'm not going to get too far into it because spoilers. Anyway, yeah, I'm just hoping that I finish this book. I do think it is the most publishable of anything I've written. I would like to develop certain parts of it more that maybe weren't as important to me 3 years ago when I started, but are definitely important to me and what I want to see in stories now, and what I think is important for people to read about right now, including myself. Not gonna lie, I was kind of making this video hoping that it would inspire me to write more, because 2 days ago, I think, was the first day I wrote in like 2 months, which is really bad. I keep giving myself goals, like I'm gonna finish by this day. No, I'm gonna finish by this day. No. I did participate in NaNoWriMo 2017 with this book, and one was successful, which makes it even sadder that I wrote 50,000 words in 1 month, and I've only written like 26,000 beyond that in the past 2.5 years, 2 years, 1.5. There we go, because I wrote like a little bit before that. Anyway, so I'm hoping that I will get writing more and finish this book, and hopefully in some time I can have super exciting news about it. But right now, it's still not actually anything official. Anyway, I'm gonna go, hopefully write, we'll see. If you like this video and want to hear more about writing rather than reading, make sure you give me a thumbs up and comment below if you have any thoughts or if you have any questions. I would love to discuss. Just don't ask me any spoilers about the book because I will not tell you. Follow me on Twitter at ReaderGonnaRead, just like my YouTube channel. You can subscribe by clicking down below or up here, and I will talk to you next time. Bye! Hey, Ellie and Dobby here. Like the video? Come subscribe. Do it right now. Click it.